I'm glad I could get to everyone early here tonight, so you can all get back and we can get back up there, reset the board, look at things. So everyone knows by now we selected Dontari Poe with our pick in the first round. Really excited about this pick for a number of reasons. We felt going into this draft that we didn't necessarily have a great need at any one position, that we didn't feel like we were cornered or into having to pick at a certain position, knowing there was a couple of positions where we wanted to upgrade the competition and have some youth for the future as well. And this one fell to us, and we were really happy about it. You know, going into this, we felt not having a great need at this position, but having a little bit of a need, and we felt we got a guy who we think in time could be the best pure nose based on what we look for in the 3-4 out of this draft. So we're pretty excited about this player, and I think you all have already gotten a chance to speak. Have you all had a chance to speak to him already? And so you've got a chance to talk to him. You got a chance to talk to Romeo, and it's a pick we're pretty darn excited about. So I'll throw it out to everyone so you guys don't have to stay up too late tonight.
You say he does the things that you guys look for in that two-gap nose. What are those things?
Yeah, and he hasn't necessarily. He's played every position along the line. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's had to play, and he has the build and the mentality to two-gap. One of the things we've learned over time for defensive linemen to two-gap, that takes a certain type of mentality, and particularly not only to be a two-gap defensive lineman, but to be a two-gap nose. Now, he has played some two-gap, not a whole lot of it, but he has the body type, the mentality, the mental. You know, one of the things that we spent a lot of time on with this player too, and have a real good feel for, is his mental and emotional endurance, because that position in there in particular takes a lot of mental and emotional endurance. He also has the right body type for it, I think, Bob. You know, in terms of not just his overall weight, but his girth. And he has, when you get to see him in person, you'll see he has the type of lower body and upper body that we're looking for in that position. And again, with the ability to two-gap. Now, what's going to happen here, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve here, just like there is with any defensive lineman who hasn't been a full-time two-gap all the time. So there'll be, you know, a little bit of a learning curve with him learning how to play this specific technique. But, you know, I've spent some time, I've been around Romeo and Anthony Pleasant for a long time, watched, you know, Anthony play the position, now coach the position pretty darn well, and watched Romeo develop a lot of guys at this position, or at, you know, as a two-gap defensive lineman, I should say.
So your belief that he can play this position is based on his athletic skills and his emotional makeup?
Yes, yes.
There's no tape really to show over a long period of time how he can play that.
Well, he has played some two-gap. Within the way that they played him over the last 3 years, there were times at different positions where he would have to head up on an offensive lineman and play that, and he can do it. Again, one of the things he has what we call a lot of lateral strength. A player who's going to two-gap, you know, it's not just upfield strength. They have to have the ability not to get washed and get hit to the side. So we've seen enough of the indicators, you know, to do that. Like, you know, you go back to, I'm not comparing the players, but Vince Wilfork never did a snap at two-gap when he was down at the, you know, at the University of Miami. There's been, you know, Jarvis Green hadn't two-gapped. Richard Seymour certainly had never two-gapped. But you see certain things within those players that you believe they have a chance to be able to play the two-gap techniques.
Scott, how much did this combine affect your decision-making in this?
Well, you know, I always say that the combine's only a piece of this, of the whole big picture. And, you know, prior to the combine, interestingly enough, you know, he only played 3 years. He was an underclassman coming out. He was academically ineligible that first year. And the 3 years he had played, prior to the combine, we had him, well, I'll say that I know where we had him rated as being the top nose coming into this draft, or potential nose in this draft. I also know a lot of pretty good football people that saw him as being, you know, the top nose prior to the combine. Then what happens at the combine, he's not on a lot of people's, you know, I mean, let's face it, inside defensive linemen aren't the guys at that position aren't, they're not really sexy or attractive to the outside world. Then all of a sudden, you know, he kind of burst onto the scene as a name because he had such a great combine workout. The fact is, though, that people who had watched him, and a lot of good football people that I respect, think that he, you know, prior to that, he was a good football player.
Scott, two-part question.
Sorry.
Did you feel that the comfortability making that selection due to the fact that your head coach is Romeo Cornell, being defensive-minded, to make this selection? Did you feel good that Romeo could get him to where he needs to be, Anthony Pleasant as well? And the second part, was this the first-round pick that you targeted that may see the earliest action on the field, being in a position of need?
Well, the answer to the first part of the question is absolutely. I think any of the defense, if you pick the right type of defensive lineman, again, physically and makeup-wise and emotionally, I think our coaching staff does a tremendous job of developing football players, and particularly Romeo and Anthony Pleasant. They've done a good job with some of our, the young players. We even saw a couple of guys last year make strong progress. Now, the second part of the question, in terms of, there was a number of players that, can't think of the exact number, but a number of players that we thought could come in. There was a lot of good players in this draft. They could come in and make an impact offensively or defensively for this football team. But also thinking about the future and thinking about who the guys going to be that make an impact not only now but in the future as well. Does that answer your question? Oh, okay.
So Scott, you mentioned the item number 1 before the comments of the combine, his stuff. How did that change your view of him, I guess? Or did it change your view of him?
Did the combine change it?
Yeah.
I don't think it changed it, because we knew, if you watch tape, you can see this guy is he's a strong player, he's a thick player, he's a big player, he's a tremendous athlete. I think one of the things that you get to see on tape that you didn't get to see at the combine is his hustle, how hard he plays. I mean, this is a guy who, again, a big man who's playing almost every snap of every game with a team and in a situation where they're losing a lot of football games, and no matter what the score is and what the situation is, this guy's going 100 miles an hour, even in the fourth quarter. I think that has something to do with how we feel about his makeup. And after the combine, it reinforced. I'll be honest, I was surprised that he ran as fast at times. I knew he could run. I knew he was athletic, but I think the actual numbers did surprise. But truth be told, I think when I heard the combine numbers or saw the combine numbers and saw how well it made me pause, because I don't ever want to get caught up in a guy and start liking a guy more because of combine numbers. We liked this player, prior to the combine numbers, and the combine actually forced us to go back and do some more work, not only on him but a number of other players. To make sure the things that we believe to be right before the combine are accurate in our minds.
You saw him in the combine and went, oh my, and then went back and looked at him more on tape.
But I had seen a bunch of him before the combine. I mean, that's part of our deal. One of the things that we try to stay pretty firm on, and what we do stay pretty firm on, is we set our board before the combine. And we have we have December meetings and February meetings, and we set our board before we go to the combine, because I don't ever want us organizationally to get caught up in pure numbers in a guy's height, weight, speed, shuttle times. And this was a case of that. We had this board set. The combine numbers were surprisingly good, but that's not how we set our board or set this player. Like I said, we have our board pretty much set by February. And there's little tweaks here and there, because I think the information, what probably impacts and affects our board more than anything in the time of between pre-combine, again, which is intentional. There's some teams that do meetings after the combine and start resetting their, or after pro days or workouts. I think the thing that impacts our board the most from the time of the combine to the time of the draft is personal information. When we start to get more and more information about the character and the makeup of people, and unfortunately I think we see more players head in the other direction than we do see them rise.
Was it something you learned about him in those 2 months or whatever?
In terms of his makeup, or?
Yeah, Anything you learned?
Nothing new. This guy is as clean can get, you know, in terms of makeup, who he is, his character, and this is, so, I mean, if that's what the question is, Adam, he certainly didn't, you know, he didn't rise for us and he didn't fall for us. He didn't go in either direction based on the combine or post-combine.
Is that for him to have that personality? You talk to people down there and you say he's a great kid.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes from a very tough background, and his older brother's in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not, you know, Ozzie
Yeah.
and Harriet raising him. It was his
Yeah.
mom by herself. I mean, does that even elevate him when you see what he had to live with and just came through and went well?
You know, Bob, you bring up a great point, and that's part of what the makeup of this kid is. I mean, he didn't, you know, you all have seen a bunch of these players and some of the backgrounds they come from. Some come from great family situations. Others come from really rough situations and some overcome the adversity they're raised with and or the circumstances and situations, and some don't. This kid, you know, he's a very interesting guy on a lot of levels because he, you know, again, here's a guy, when we do our psychological testing, this is a guy who consistently overcomes adversity. Again, you put him in a situation, he's got his home life, his home situation, growing up how he did. He's achieved at every level. He's taken care of himself. He's kept himself out of trouble and had plenty of opportunity, you know, based on where he comes from, there's probably opportunities to be in trouble. He didn't do that. You know, he didn't end up in any trouble. But the other thing is, again, it's on the surface, it may not seem related, but I think it is related. Here's a guy who for 3 years is at Memphis. They're losing a lot of football games. And he's on the field when they're getting completely blown out. And if you go back and you watch the tape, it's one of these situations where you really want to get inside the kid's head and say, okay, what is it that's making you still go? You know, because a lot of people give up before this. So they're tapping out, trying to get out. You know, hey, this game's over. I want out. I want to keep myself safe. I don't want to get hurt. But here's a guy who's going 100 miles an hour, chasing things down on the field. And again, to me and Romeo and the coaches, we all felt that this gives some insight into the kid as to who he is. And again, you know, maybe I talk about this too much, but who we have in that locker room is critical to us, and how important this game is to him, and how important being a football player and being a professional and playing hard and working hard is all part of what's important to us, Bob. And the fact that he did, you know, that he went through, that he was raised in circumstances and is persevered is pretty impressive.
You say watching the tape, you know, watching the tape, I mean, obviously, always comes down to watching the tape. We played 6 games against the SEC. The stats show 5 tackles. He didn't show up on the stat sheet. When you look at his stat sheets, he doesn't always show up on the stat sheets. And I realize that's not a judge of his ability to play, but he did not play against top-notch competition every Sunday, like the SEC.
No, that's true.
And how did he play in those games against Mississippi State, Tennessee, I think, and Mississippi? He
played well. And here's, you know, to your point about the production. So here's one of the things that we're very, you know, try to be very thorough on this stuff. You know, production, there's different types of production, as you mentioned. There's the production on paper that manifests itself in tackles on the sheet or sacks on the sheets or tackles for a loss. Then there's this other kind of production where there's certain players that are really good football players that are, if they're surrounded by other players, if they're the best player, they sometimes create plays for other players. They become disruptive forces. They do things that allow other players to be good players. In his case, you know, one of the things we went back that and we did a very thorough study on is when you look at his numbers on paper, the number of tackles, the number of sacks, they're not exciting. They're not overwhelming in any way. So what we did is we went back and looked at every single snap from this year and a bunch of snaps from 2010. But on every single one of the snaps this year, for instance, in the passing situation, in a lot of the teams that they played, not only in their conference, but some of the non-conference players, it's a lot of it's spread offense, a lot of it is, you know, shotgun snap, balls out right away. And just, for instance, in the passing, the passing game, for the amount of snaps that he took, at least 49% of the snaps were literally plays that could not be deemed plays that would allow him to have production. So what I'm saying is the ball snapped, the quarterback gets it, the ball's out, it's a screen, it's a quick pass, so the ball's out right away, and it's one of these things for defensive linemen, as we've seen with a lot of these spread offenses, there's not an opportunity for them to apply pressure, for them to get a hit on the quarterback. So 49% of the snaps this year alone were plays in the passing game, were plays where he could not, there wasn't an opportunity to get production. So to your point, and to the point that I know that, you know, one of the things that I asked, boy, I'd like to see a lot more production on paper, this guy, on this player. So we went back and made sure we looked at it. We charted every single snap that this player took this year and almost every single snap last year. But in this year's snapshot alone, it's understandable why some of the production on paper wasn't there.
Some fans fall in love with certain mock drafts, and you kind of roll your eyes and you deal with this every year anywhere. What do you say to fans who have questions or fell in love with another option that might have been there at 11, or say, why didn't they trade down, or why couldn't even continue their A, B, and C? What do you say about that?
I'm not sure what to say to the fans, you know, about that. I mean, the fact is, we like this player. We really like this player, and the opportunities to try, you know, there were opportunities maybe to trade up, but would have cost too much. And then there's opportunities where we could have moved back, where and we had two sound opportunities to move back from this pick and not take this player, and chose not to because we wanted this player. And we felt, again, based on where we think some of the help is needed on defense, we thought this was the right pick to make.
Last question, Sam.
Who did you,
Scott,
Sam,
sort of,
throwing your voice.
yeah.
It's a little bit off the Sean, but as far as like not trading down and taking a guy that a lot of people rag along, ceiling, big ceiling, low floor kind of guy, it's easy to see this as sort of a different approach than we've had in drafts here in Kansas City. Do you see it like that?
Different, I'm not sure, different.
You've been a safe guy, adverse to risk, those kinds of things. You know what I mean? You've said that a lot yourself,
yeah,
that you don't like to take risks, and this is a guy that a lot of people, most everybody thinks is a big risk.
Most everybody being, most everybody in the room, or most everybody in the NFL, or?
All the reports that we've heard.
We think he's a good player. You know, I mean, I think that's probably the best way. We collectively, again, the draft picks that we do, I don't, at the end of the day, I make this pick, but I take in a lot of input, and there's a lot of really good football people that have done a lot of winning with and developing of players that I respect, that really felt good about this player as well. We all didn't think, I don't think this is as risky a pick, because, again, here's what we do know. Here's what's not risky about the player. The player fits the mold of the type of player that we're looking for physically for that position. He fits a need to a degree. He fits everything that we believe in makeup-wise, you know, in terms of his passion for the game, his love for the game, his preparation for the game, his work ethic, the way he plays on something. So to me, when you find a guy like this, and again, it's similar to other players that we've taken. This is not a risky player in the sense that I know, and we know, that we've got a football player that's going to come in here and be a professional, do a great job, and we're going to be able to maximize his abilities. To me, what's riskier more is a guy who has a long checkered past of issues that may never allow the player to manifest themselves into becoming a good football player, because of all of their personal issues or habits or lifestyle, or the fact that they didn't play. This is a young player who's got a lot of talent, and we know is going to play football the way that not only we want Kansas City Chiefs to play football, but I think something I've learned over time here, or been reinforced over time here, is there's a certain type of player that this city likes and this fan base likes, and it's very much the same kind of player that Romeo likes, that I like, and our coaching staff likes, is a guy who is a true professional, committed, plays hard, and is going to be a good football player. So I don't see him as being risky in any of those ways at all, Sam.